Well, hey there, it's that coding guy here, breaking it down and making it accessible. Let's talk about arrays. Arrays in Java. Arrays are a way to stuff multiple values into one variable. And if you know arrays from other languages, maybe JavaScript or something like that, where you can put any data type in there. The thing about Java arrays is, it's a strongly typed language, so it's going to enforce that every element in that array is the same data type. Now, you could do worse than going to look at the Oracle documentation, the tutorials for this, and rather than reinvent the wheel on an image of how arrays are usually thought about, let's use the source. So we can think of an array as a bunch of boxes, and we can put values in those boxes as long as they're all the same data type. And then we're going to have a specific way of referencing each little box in that array. You could think of it like a train with a bunch of boxcars, right? There's the first car, second car, third car, etc. The thing about arrays in most languages is that they are zero index based. So that means if we're talking about the first element or the first car on that train, we're talking about the zero element or the zeroth element. And then we would say that the index of that element or that box, the index is 0. So this is an example of an array of 10 elements, and they go from index 0 to 9. All right, so let's take a look at that in code. If we wanted to declare an array, we'll start off as we usually do with a data type, right? Let's make an array of integers. So we'll start off with int, then we're going to use these square brackets. So that signifies, hey, this is an array. Next, our variable name, I'll just call it first array. Or camel casing there, good variable practice. And if we want, we can just declare it, right? Some of my other videos, I talk about the difference between declaration and initialization. So that's declaring an array, and then if we want to initialize that array to a value, we could say first array equal to new int, and we must provide the size of this array. So if we want this array to be able to hold 5 elements, we have to tell it that we want it to hold 5 elements. And when we do this, this is created in memory. Java has set aside space and memory for 5 elements only. We can't later push another element onto this array and give it a bigger length. We would have to redeclare an entirely new array if we wanted to do that. So, as always, we can combine declaration and initialization into one line, right? So we could come back up here and just do that. It's all on one line now. And the other way to initialize an array is to actually provide all the values up front. So I'm just going to copy this line. I use Control D here to quickly duplicate a line. It's one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts. And I'll change this to second array. And rather than provide the number or the size of this array, we can just go ahead and declare the actual values that we want in this array. So if we did 5, 10, 15, 20, and I'll code style that real quick. Because we explicitly said these are the values in my array, we don't actually have to provide the size because the size is 4. So we can get away without providing that size there. If we tried to do that up here, not going to work. What's it tell us? Array initializer expected. So we could do that. So how do we access these guys then? We talked about initializing these values. Let's check it out. What if we wanted to take a look at the very first element in second array? Well, we're going to use SOUT, S-O-U-T, for a quick shortcut here. Gets us a system out print line, and then we can print stuff. So to access the first element in second array, if you remember, we talked about zero-based index. So we'll reference the array by name and then provide the index of the value that we want to work with. And if we're going to try to look at that 5 there, we want the 0 index on second array. So if we do that, run this guy, we get our 5. And of course, this really just evaluates to a value, right? This evaluates to 5. So now we can just perform other computations on this if we want. If we want to add the first and second elements of this array together, no problemo. We can just do second array, provide that index, and we're going to get 5 plus 10. I would expect to see 15 here. Cool. So what about those elements hanging out up there on first array, right? We declared the space and initialized this to a size 5 array. But what are the values in there right now? Let's take a peek. Let's SOUT, and then I'll just comment that guy out. And let's take a look at the first element of first array. And before I run this, do we have any ideas on what we might see here? I can think of a couple. All right. I'm thinking, in some of those other videos, I referenced the value of null, which is the value of something where we haven't given it a value, right? It is on objects and complex types, but for primitives, especially int, do you remember what the default value of an int is? I'm thinking we're going to get 0, right? Because all of the variables inside this array are ints, we get the default array back, the default value of an int back, rather than the default value of a complex type, if that makes sense. Now, if we took off this initialization, and now it's not even going to let us do it because it hasn't been initialized. Well, let's get rid of this guy for the moment, and we'll talk about second array again. One more thing I really wanted to cover here was, what if we try to access an element that doesn't exist? We've got 4 elements in this array, so our indexes actually run from 0 to 3. What is going to happen if we try to take a peek at what's in element 4? All right. We get an exception. And so that means something went wrong in our code, and it's saying index 4 is out of bounds for a length 4 array at line 8 here. And if I look, actually, this is highlighted. It was trying to warn me. It says, hey, array index is out of bounds. Can't do that. It's very common to get index out of bounds when we're working with arrays at first and trying to figure things out. And later, when we go through loops, we'll see how we can use code to iterate through these arrays and do different operations on each element if we want to. So hopefully that helps get you started on tinkering with arrays. There are also other ways to hold more than one value in one variable. And we'll also in the future dig into this thing called collections, and we'll see we have many more options when we want to work with many values in the same variable. And then before we close here, I've got a serious question for you. Why are like buttons smashed and not tapped or coerced or smooshed? I don't know. If this content was helpful to you, toss me a like, comment in the video. I'd really love to hear any feedback that you've got, and I hope this has been helpful. Cheers.